Okay. Hey guys, so I've been meaning to post and I haven't had a chance. Um it Life got in the way. Um I've been working basically all the time. When I haven't been working, I've been sleeping. So uh it's one of those things where you make your choice, right? Anyway, so today I'm not sure. There's so much to talk about. So many different things going on in the world. So many misconceptions in the world. And I mean, I'd love to just be able to talk about it all at once. But that would take hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And again, everything I say is my opinion based on facts I've found, based on scriptural references, things prophets have said, everything. It's all based on the things that have been stated and spoken of in the church, but also facts that exist. Yeah, we know the Bible says that the earth was created in 6 days, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, that could be 6 periods of time," and I'm like, "No, it's 6 days. If God says it's 6 days, it's 6 days." God even gives us a direct time period to refer to for a 24-hour period of time, the rising and the setting of the sun. And it wasn't until, recent times when people started going, "Oh, well, because of the billion-year concept, God couldn't have done it in 6 days." Why couldn't God have done it in 6 days? Like, He's all freaking powerful. When we say God didn't do it in 6 days, we are literally limiting God's power. The man said he can make a mountain move if you speak it, and you have the faith the size of a mustard seed. Like, if God can move a mountain, when you say, "Mountain, move," then why couldn't God create the world in 6 days? Like, it's limiting his power saying he didn't. It's not putting unrealistic or fantastical expectations on him. It's not putting any expectations on him. It's taking his word at his word. I wasn't gonna originally talk about this. This is a tangent of mine. Science is proving more and more that things are wrong. Carbon dating. They've found that diamonds that are supposed to be 2.3 billion years old or older, right, have carbon-14. Carbon-14 at that rate would have completely evaporated out of that diamond. Carbon-14 doesn't last that long. Carbon-14 breaks down at a rate where if the entire Earth was composed of carbon-14, it would have broken down into its daughter carbon state completely. So there was no more carbon-14 within 1,000,000 years. There wouldn't be any more carbon-14 anywhere after 1,000,000 years. It breaks down at that much of a rate, at that fast of a rate. Which is why you can't carbon date dinosaur bones. Because they break down too fast. Carbon-14 breaks down too fast. So instead they radioisotope date. But in order to radioisotope date, you have to say that all of the radioactive elements within that dinosaur bone came from within that dinosaur bone. They didn't come from anywhere else. Basically what geologists are saying is, our dating methods are wrong, they're broken and flawed, and yet we're still going to use them to explain the age of the Earth. Would you go to a doctor who said that there was a 50% chance he could do the surgery? Or would you go to a chemist if he said there was a 50% chance he was capable of properly performing the chemical analysis of whatever experiment he's doing? No, you don't go to those people. You don't go to a system that's open-ended. You don't go to a system that's flawed. Something that's incapable of doing what you want it to do. If it can't properly do what you want it to do, then you don't go to that system. And yet, that's what scientists do. They go to systems that are flawed and designed to do one thing, but they can only do that one thing if they're sure that all that stuff comes from that one place. But they can't. With fossils, with rocks, they can't be sure that there's no change or exchange after fossilization or after the creation of the rock. And so they cannot properly date rocks. They can't properly date dinosaur bones. Carbon-14, carbon dating, dates most everything at an age younger than 6,000 years. Younger. Not older, younger. The oldest thing carbon dated dates less than, will date less than 6,000 years old. Because carbon-14 can't exist in organic materials for lengthy periods of time. It just doesn't happen. It dissipates and goes away really fast. Which, I mean, that proves young Earth theory, but again, that wasn't what I was going to go off on. I mean, these are just facts that are out there. No, originally, my plan, and I'm still going to talk about it, is I've heard a lot of my coworkers and I've seen a lot of scientific effort being put into trying to rewrite the history of the Americas based on whatever theory here or there. I saw this video a couple days ago from the History Channel about giants in America being Viking. And my thought was, would it be so hard to read scripture and be like, hey, this is a historical document. This makes sense. Let's follow this. Would it be so hard for one of these archaeologists that's so interested in rewriting the history to pick up the Book of Mormon and read it and be like, this is about the peoples in the American continent? Oh, but it says they built cities. Well, we find evidence of cities all over the place, buried. Oh, but it speaks of huge populations. We know there were huge populations of Native Americans long before the Columbian contacts. As a matter of fact, the Columbian contacts eliminated large, vast majorities of the peoples here on the American continent. Would it really be so hard to say, this makes sense as a historical document? But instead they ignore it because it's religious. Talks about him. And so they ignore it. And they ignore it, and they ignore it, and they ignore it. I mean, really? Like, really? You have yeah, we have evidence of giants. But in the Book of Mormon it speaks of large and mighty men. In the book of Ether. It says that the people of Ether were large and mighty men. I'd say a large and mighty man would be considered a giant. I've met some big men in my life. And I call them giants. I don't call them these huge, like, I call them large men and mighty men. And yeah, I've even referred to them as giants. There's one guy at one of the sites I work at. I'm a security officer for anybody that's interested in that part of in knowing that part of my life. But one of the sites I work at, there's this guy. He comes in. He's 7'3". Right? That's a big guy. He could probably curl me. His biceps are almost as big around as my head. He is huge. And I would describe him as a large and mighty man. I would describe him as a giant. Heck, I described my wife's father as a giant, and he's only 6'3". He's not huge. He's a whole lot bigger than me. I mean, I only come up to, like, his chin. So, I'd describe him as a large and mighty man. It's one of those things where, is it so hard to imagine that there was a race of people that were very large, to the point that most people might consider them giants nowadays? No, that's not hard at all. So we find giants all around the world. And in the Bible it says in that time, in those days there were giants. In those days there lived giants. And again, is it hard to imagine that someone my height, just under 6 foot, who's talking to someone who's almost 7 foot tall or taller, would describe that man as a giant? Yeah. Abso-friggin-lutely. Like, there are tall men out there. There are really tall guys out there. And yeah, we might call them mighty men. So, I mean, it's not that hard to imagine a race of people that are around that height that are wiped out because they're unrighteous. And then we come to today's big thing, which is the Middle Eastern dispute. The current dispute in Israel between Gaza, the West Bank, and the nation of Israel. The people of the who are causing these attacks. I have seen this everywhere. I've seen this conversation come up everywhere. The people who are causing these attacks, they're not Islamics. Palestine is not a nation of Islam. Palestine was the name that the Roman government gave to the area that is now the nation of Israel when they literally destroyed Jerusalem. When the temple was ripped down to its foundations. When it was ripped down to the lowest point, so that no stone remained standing upon another stone. The Romans came in and they renamed the place. And part of the name was Palestinia. To disconnect it from the Jews. To tear the Jews down to their lowest possible points. And those Arabs who lived in the area surrounding, who were called Canaanites at the time, were allowed to move into the area. And they became known as Palestinians. What you have to remember is that whole state of Israel was originally known as Canaan. And it was given by the Lord, by God, to Abraham. And Abraham maintained it until his son Jacob and until his grandson Jacob, known as Israel, and his sons and their children moved to Egypt to survive a worldwide drought and famine. Or at least a drought and famine that encompassed that area of the world as well as Egypt. And at that point in time, Egypt going all the way down into Somalia. And yeah. It was a world drought, according to the people. Which would make sense considering it encompassed the entire Sumerian Empire, the Hittite Empire. The Hittite king even pleaded with the Pharaoh of Egypt to give him food so that he could keep his people alive during the drought, which led to the Hittites being within a treaty of Egypt until many of their cities were wiped out by the Hebrews on their way back to Canaan. Anyway, so that's when the people of Israel left Israel. And they left their land of inheritance. They left the land of Canaan. And then they came back. And they took Canaan back. It was theirs to begin with. And guess what? They took it back. I mean, people had moved in. It had been several generations. And people had moved in. To the land and built up cities. And so, what did the Israelites do? They came in and they took the cities. They took them back. They conquered them and they took the area back. And reestablished the kingdom of Israel. And there were two parts to the kingdom of Israel. There was the northern kingdom and the kingdom of Judah. Judah being the largest branch. Oh. So they did that. And then they were captured by the Babylonians and the Sumerians. I think it was the Sumerians first. Both times Jerusalem's destroyed. And then they're finally let go from Samaria and Babylonia and allowed back to their land. And they rebuild the temple. They rebuild the temple of Solomon and David. And the Romans come in and they take the place over. They're like, you're going to listen to us now. La 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 la. Jews aren't too happy with this, so there's quite a bit of resistance. So a Jew is placed as the ruler over them. This would be the Herod family. Christ is born. Goes to Egypt, comes back, does his ministry, has his life. He's crucified, resurrected. And then the Jews really start rebelling after he dies and is resurrected and ascends to heaven. Not the Christians. The Christians are wiped out fairly succinctly. There's not a Christian left by the end of 70 AD. Not in the sense that they existed before. We're talking true Christians who practice Christ's religion that Christ taught. Are there people that believe Christ was the Savior and Redeemer of the world? Yes. Are there people that believe that he was crucified and resurrected? Yes. But there are not people who practice Christ's church. There was no priesthood left on the earth. There was no gospel correction left. 70 AD rolls around. And the Romans are so sick and tired of the revolts and the death of their soldiers that friggin' Nero, Emperor of Rome, who burned Rome to the ground and blamed the Christians, sends in all his armies. Right? He's so fed up and sick and tired of these people saying, hey, we don't want you in our lands anymore, that he sends his soldiers and he burns the city to the ground. He totally and entirely destroys and wipes it out. There is nothing left. And he takes the Jews into captivity. And he takes them up to Europe. And spreads them around to the other portions of his land. To the other portions of the empire. He sells some to India and some up into Russia. He sells some to Egypt. He even ships some down to Somalia. Because at this point in time, Egypt is part of the Roman Empire. Thanks to Cleopatra. And other rulers in Egypt that, gave treaty. They knew their empire was crumbling and they said, hey, we'll be part of the Roman Empire. So, there's Jews sold all the way down into Somalia and Congo. And at that point in time, the Arabs in the surrounding area saw that the land was open again and moved in. 268 AD, Christianity becomes the official religion of the the Roman Empire, and it becomes the Holy Roman Empire, which then develops into the Catholic Church. As a matter of fact, at that point in time, the Emperor of the Roman Empire was the Pope. He elected himself the Pope. I mean, he was the Emperor. No one was going to argue with him. And that area remained in Arab control until the 60s. Well, in the 40s, just after World War II, there was a small area just outside of Jerusalem established for the Jews to reestablish themselves. In the 60s, a country was given to them. It was a small one, and it didn't include Jerusalem. It wasn't until almost the 70s that the country of Israel was established, and established as a reestablishment area for the Jewish people. And then it included Jerusalem. This ticked off the Arabs that were already living in the area, which nobody said they had to leave. No one. But there were certain groups who believed that they had the right to say, we don't want the Jews here. They're Jews, we don't want them. I mean, yeah, cool. Anti-Semitics. And they became the racist terrorist organizations like Hamas. that are constantly bombarding not only Jerusalem but Israel and other areas in Israel with, and I mean even Tel Aviv, with missiles and bombs, and end up being fought back. And they're the ones that are killing people. It's not the people of Gaza. I'm sure the people of Gaza would be like, wait, we live in this if Gaza was made part of Israel, it would probably not change the vast majority of the people in Gaza's life. It probably wouldn't. It would probably make no difference. There are Israelites that are Islamic. They call themselves Israelites or Israelis, but they're Muslim and they're of Arab descent. Why do they call themselves Israelis or Israelites? Because they are born in Israel. It's not that hard. This has nothing to do with Israel or Palestine. It doesn't. The fights and the arguments and the bombings and the missile attacks, they have nothing to do with Palestine or Israel. It has to do with terrorist organizations that are anti-Semitic and don't want the Jews in the area. It's not about the name of the place or who gets to live there or who doesn't. It's about an anti-Semitic group saying that they're making these bombings and performing these bombings for Palestine, when most people who are in Israel consider themselves Israeli because they're born in Israel. They're terrorist organizations, and any person who is pro-Palestine